This is intended to be the hardest shot to green screen that you could ever have to deal with. So that green screen is being turned blue-green as it goes through that cup. The headdress that Jordan is wearing, not only does it contain all the colors of the rainbow, it is transparent.
Niko from Corridor just fixed a problem that has been plaguing VFX artists for 3 decades.
Whoa! Oh my gosh! Holy! We can talk to our computers, and yet green screen is still the same 30-year-old plugin.
And he did so with the help of an open source community and an openness to embracing new ways of work.
I try to be strategic. I try to only run to the brick walls that I know are brittle and I can break them down easily, which is part of the equation, right?
In this episode, Niko walks us through his personal technological breakthroughs from the Corridor archives.
This is our very first video with a camera on a drone that's smooth. Every time it flashes, you see the zombie, but it's teleporting closer and closer and closer.
Oh shit.
I need to actually show, point of view, no match cuts, the effect of going down a hallway and having the end of it never get closer.
Corridor Digital has been blazing their own path and experimenting with new technologies since the beginning. And that's what makes them so special. Niko and I discuss all that and where he sees it all going.
I am so fascinated to see what happens in the space of software tools for art, because now we're reaching a point where artists can make their tools. And it's up to us as the creators to learn the new technology and to use it in a smart way and make something still meaningful that impacts and makes the audience feel something.
Where do you want to start?
Let's take it back a ways. Let's go to Superman with a GoPro.
Looks good. Okay, if found, return to Sam Gorski. This ought to look pretty cool.
What year is this?
Superman with the GoPro is probably like 2011?
Oh my God. You guys, yes.
2012, somewhere around there. Every single one of our projects more or less involves us trying to do something new that enables us to like do a crazier vision of something because we have some new tool. The visual effects artists that I look up to that inspired me with like films, you know, the people that put together all the Star Wars ships or the crazy effects that were, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm going kind of old here, but even take it all the way up to like The Matrix and Lord of the Rings, even the newer stuff now. Every time one of those movies came out and it would hit me emotionally, it turns out that the artists working on that film had something they wanted to try to do. They had an idea that no one else had done before. And if they took the time and they built this crazy illusion or trick or system, they could show you something on screen that no one's ever seen before. And novelty is huge, especially if you're trying to break out on YouTube, as you probably know.
Or anywhere. I mean, how about...
Anywhere, honestly, yeah. YouTube is just a continuation of the human experience of art and media. So yeah, novelty matters, period. With technology, it's easy to get psyched about technology and then figure out a use for it later, as opposed to, I have a cool idea, let me use technology to enable that. Superman with the GoPro is an example of us being like, wait, we have an unlock here. This is our very first, what makes it special is this is our very first ever video with a camera on a drone that's smooth. So the very first gimbal for the very first DJI, whatever they were called back then, Phantom. And you could see it finally with like, you know, a headset and it would fly smoothly. So it would give you a stabilized shot where you could fly through things. And up to this point, this stuff is either rent a helicopter or get a crazy cable cam.
It's incredible.
Or get a crane. Like, truly, there was not a way to get these shots before this point.
I know, and I love that now you're coming back to it and it feels different to look at it, I'm sure.
100%. And, you know, at this time, the only camera you could use was a GoPro.
Right.
So even then, it's still very cinematically limiting. Now, you know, they have great cameras on all these different DJI drones and other drones. But what it let us do is it let us do this crazy idea of being able to fly. You know, what's the context of the story? Well, let's go with Superman. We came up with that kind of later, but the first idea is like, what if you could just fly? And it's just the point of view of flying. And I had not seen it before realized like this. And so it's here's some technology, here's an idea, here's a thing I've always wanted to do, and then bring them all together. Boom, here's the final product. And it resonates and it hits people, you know? So
I'm so glad you started with this too, because I feel like it gets at something that's consistent through these other projects, which is like you have an idea that you want to express, you run into a technological problem. But unlike me, where I just am like, okay, I was dumb, I'll change my idea. No, I know, you know what I'm saying? But like most people, right? You're like, I'm going to run into the brick wall until
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I try to be strategic. I try to
Yeah,
only
yeah.
run to the brick walls that I know are brittle and I can break them down
Yeah.
easily, which is part of the equation, right?
Yeah.
You got to tackle problems that you know you can tackle, but there's always something novel
Well,
lying under each one of those leaves.
And also you have, I feel like the other thing that's cool is that you have people that help you get over, or you have like
Yes.
ways to get over, right? That brick walls are just sort of like making the story of getting to the end
Yeah.
a little interesting, more interesting.
I mean, yeah, this project wouldn't have been possible without like a ton of collaboration. Taylor was the name of the guy, but he's the guy who was buying the
just like-
tech and
yeah.
built this thing. Had drones weren't a thing back then, and he
Yes.
was one of the first guys. And he started working with us. He was, really passionate about just making something cool with us, which is kind of an essential if you're doing things for YouTube. But like a big thing that I've kind of learned is like when it comes to making videos on the internet, like everybody's the community. Like you reach out to everybody when you reach out on the internet. And
Yeah.
while the filmmaking community might, I don't know, it's a big community on the internet, and you can find other passionate people. So like we've always really
Yeah.
just blended all that stuff together for these kind of things.
I feel like that is at the core of so many great internet series, basically, is that they are really a collaboration with the community as well. Like it's such an important piece to the technology side of it, because it's like it really gives you a sense of like, well, we're not going to replace them, right? Like we're going to do the thing that we're doing with them, and we're going to find better ways to do that.
I did these 2 short like horror-esque action films last year, and they were both inspired by physics concepts and mathematical concepts. First one is this short called Graymatter.
Counseling's clearing their schedules.
All right, folks, let's get moving.
911 gets a call. There's a hostage situation in this apartment. SWAT team gets called in. Little do they know there's a cosmic horror demon in this building who's effectively luring people in. That's one of the ways it does it. So they get absorbed into
Damn,
this
that always
alternate
happens.
they get absorbed into this alternate dimension
Yeah.
building, and in this space it's a non-Euclidean space. And so, Euclidean geometry is your classic geometry. You have right angles, you have parallel lines. For example, you might have a spherical space, though. And if you remember your geometry class, if you draw parallel lines on a sphere, well, they eventually intersect. And that's like a property, is like parallel lines don't intersect unless they're on spherical space. And there's other weird things like that. So I took that concept of, for example, traveling in a straight line, but never reaching the end of a line because it's just going around in a circle because you're in spherical space. And I applied that to these guys going down this hallway. They're trying to reach this apartment where they know the situation's at, and the person's on the phone patching the radio. They can hear how desperate it's getting. And as they keep walking, they never get any closer. But yet the hallway's going by them. They can see the doors going by. And I executed this in 2 ways. So first off, I start with like a simple illusion here.
Pierce, CNT's reestablished contact with the victim.
So, they walk up, they enter the building, they're going down the hallway. And with filmmaking, if you're gonna do something visual, you're gonna use a whole grab bag of tricks. Just like a magician, you have to change your technique every time. So first thing here, so just walking down, we have the door, it has a number on it. We're going to continue to the next door, match cut. And
Nice.
It's very hidden.
Nice.
And now we've just reset to the end of the hallway.
Yeah.
And we arrive at the same door. Actually, they're walking by it again. There's another
Yes.
match cut right there. So now we're still walking on the same hallway. Now we're passing the same door again. And so the situation happens here where, they're like, wait a minute, we're not making any progress. We're walking, we loop around, we come back. So, okay, first technology I'm going to use is match cutting.
Yes.
The second thing I need to get to here, though, is I need to elevate the effect at some point. I need to actually show, point of view, no match cuts, the effect of going down a hallway and having the end of it never get closer. So how am I going to do that? So, okay, I have this crazy idea. And how am I going to physically pull off this physically impossible thing?
Yeah.
And so that's where I turned to a newer technology, which is called Gaussian splats. So Gaussian splats basically let you take a bunch of pictures of a scene. You take it from as many points of view as you can. And then using a mix of geometry and trigonometry and spherical harmonics and machine learning, you basically recreate the scene, you figure out where all these points are, and then these like blurry blobs are predicted for these points. And when you have enough of these blurry blobs, they effectively make up 3D pixels and they recreate the scene.
Yeah.
And one of the really cool things about that
so cool.
is that things like reflections and like the shine of light comes through because you get these different blobs that show up from different points of view that mimic that effect. It's really crazy because it's very simple in one way and hyper complicated in another way, but it looks awesome. It looks photoreal. And so, for example, this hallway that we're in, there's bricks, there's shiny concrete on the ground. If I just made a 3D model of it, it just wouldn't look real. So we get to this sequence here now where he starts running and we go to the body cam point of view. And this is all a Gaussian splat.
Whoa.
So as we keep moving forward, like it looks photoreal, it looks like it's coming from a GoPro. We're moving down the hallway.
Yo.
Yeah, but the hallway never gets any closer. They're always in the same spot, looping and looping and looping.
I love this so much. People see weakness in some machine learning tools, right? But like the reality is like it's math. Right, and like you're using the math to make something that is mathematically impossible feels like a perfect idea.
If I want to stand out as a filmmaker, I need to create images that stand out.
That is a standout. that loop. Right, I hadn't seen something like that before, and also it's like in that perfect zone of like if you don't understand it, it's magic. Right, when it's like, and I don't, I don't understand it. Like,
I mean, just using a new tool won't guarantee that you stand out.
Yes, that's
but
true.
Using a new tool in a new way or an old tool in a new way and like also combining it with something that has like classic storytelling impact, like then you can start to make an impact. I made a sequel to Graymatter, which is really just a continuation. It was not really a sequel. So they enter into this apartment, and this apartment is based on the idea of quantum superposition.
Yeah.
Something exists in multiple states until it's observed. So they walk into this apartment. It's a black void. It's covered with garbage, like a hoarder's apartment. And they find this dead body. And the only light is from their flashlights of their guns. And when they look away and they look back, the body's moved. It's effectively a quantum zombie.
Yes.
And it starts coming to life, and little by little starts plucking them into darkness. The final climax of this is this creature is now, after the one last remaining guy in this room, this void, and there's no light because his flashlight stops working. So the only light in the scene is the muzzle flash from his gun when he shoots his gun. Every time it flashes, you see the zombie, but it's teleporting closer and closer and closer.
Oh, shit.
as the muzzle flashes go off. To do that, I need to figure out a way to do muzzle flashes, right?
You can't fake that because it's got to light up the person.
Right, exactly. And we made a whole video talking about that here.
This is what a real muzzle flash looks like. Notice the flying shells, the gun's forceful kickback, and the light illuminating my body.
We compared, a real muzzle flash and how bright it is, which movies get this wrong all the time. And they always
I did this on a low budget B movie. It was so fun, but it's not right.
Yeah, when you do it in post, when you just paste the muzzle flash on and you go with the paintbrush and you brighten up the shot, it doesn't look very good. It doesn't look real. So, you need real light and it's bright. And I've filmed with real blank firing weapons before, and, I know what it looks like, and it's really powerful, and you want that power in your filmmaking.
So anyways, I want to see what your solution was.
I love using blanks, but I couldn't use them here.
Yeah.
Mainly for the sound. Blanks are really loud.
Yeah.
It's really annoying when everybody has ear protectors on set and you have to give direction. Everybody's like, what?
I can get that. Yeah.
I'll take your ear protection off. So what if I could build a system that could detect that sound, that pop of the airsoft gun, and flash a light so that I could have suspended in the scene. And I would get all the lighting, I would get all the action in the firearm, it'd be synced up. You get also the sound of it, which is nice to help the actors know when things are happening. But I just wouldn't have to worry about the actual muzzle flash. Later on in After Effects or Fusion or whatever, I can just go and paste in a muzzle flash and basically be done with my effect because all the light is already there. Sounds good. Problem is, I don't know electronics. I don't know how to build this
I was going to say, it sounds so nice and simple.
So in this case, I wanted to figure out electronics. And this was one of my first times I used Claude. I used an LLM to guide me through making something. And this kind of doubles as an experiment for that as well. And I was like, how would I approach this? What kind of stuff would I use? And, there's so many different tools out there and so many different things. You need to know where the limitations are and how to use them effectively. So here it is. I'm going to use an LLM. I'm going to ask it to guide me through this process. And I know enough about it that I can kind of tell where it's working, where it's not working, but I don't know the exact details. But I sat down, I spec'd out all the pieces. Claude helped me figure out, you're going to use an Arduino, you're going to use this mic module, you're going to use this. Here's a rough idea of how much it will cost. Here's how you'd build it. I write the code with Claude to put on the Arduino, the script or whatever. And naturally, it doesn't work on the first time.
Yeah.
And it's this is where many of the limitations of this tool lies. But it got me here. And so now you sit down and start working through it. Okay, can I read the code? Do I have questions about what the code is doing? Can I, pull up other things people have done online? Can I run this through Claude again? Can it explain to me what's happening? And little by little, I got it all working. And it's funny because it reminds me a lot of directing. Claude is effectively somebody who will help you, or something that will help you do something, but you still need to very much direct it, like, to the detail. If the actor's like, how should I feel here? And the director goes, I don't know, how do you think you should feel? That's not directing.
You have to bring a very strong vision, even if
Yeah.
you don't know any of the specific answers.
Yeah, you need to have a full top to bottom understanding of how the system works. Like, how is my weird electronic microphone light detector thing going to actually work? I need to know top to bottom exactly how it works. But writing the actual code and like which exact module to buy, I can work through that. I can figure that out.
I see.
But what I ended up coding was a system that would detect the change in sound levels, and based on a steep enough change, where I could change with the dial, by the way, so I could change the sensitivity.
Oh, nice.
It would send a DMX signal to a light to turn that light on and off.
Yeah.
And once again, there's a question of like, can I hook up an Arduino to a DMX? Is DMX even the right thing? You want to constantly like question your assumptions the whole way through one of these things. Long story short, I got it working. And it was a really cool experience in learning about electronics, learning about code, and kind of learning how something like Claude or an LLM can take what is kind of a really scary and impenetrable world of computer code and make that way more approachable. And that's been a huge evolution for myself for the past few years. I've been getting way more comfortable with open source projects and using Python and things like that. Like, open source is transformative, and the things happening in the open source world is amazing. Because previously, any crazy visual technology that you would see would be developed behind closed doors, like ILM or Weta. And they'd come up with crazy things, and they had incredibly smart people and the budget from these films to motivate them and incentivize them to make these tools. But there's no reason to release them open source. And people who are really talented would be scattered across the world, and they wouldn't be able to work on this stuff full time. Yeah. But now, with just the way things are coming together and the way people are working, there are so many amazing filmmaking tools that are being developed by the community for the community, doing really high-level things. The biggest one, the obvious one, is Blender. Like, Blender is incredible. Blender is toe-to-toe with like industry standard software packages.
It's beyond that. Like, I think that like I was as inspired by Flow as I was by Toy Story, because what that represented was this massive, really important change in how animation works. Like, I have looked up to Pixar my entire life, and to see this small team able to do something so resonant and beautiful, and its own vision, right? Like, there is nothing like that, and it's the open source community that makes that possible. And like, I just love how like what you're describing here. It's like I am someone that has made curiosity-driven videos my entire career. And what you are describing is just a curiosity-driven story, right? Like,
curiosity-driven tool making.
You hit a problem, but then unlike most people, you ask the next question. Maybe you could have made the noise, but actually taking the problem seriously, you got to a really unique and interesting thing that, I mean, I would imagine that's still helping you in different ways, than you expected today.
100%. Yes. He's all alone. He's lost his teammates. This is my buddy Guy, by the way. Fantastic actor and stuntman. He played Black Panther.
About to experience something terrible.
So, boom, 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 boom. So every one of these flashes is a practical flash that is not being caused by the airsoft gun, obviously, because it's an airsoft gun, but it's being caused by the actual rig that I built.
And it sold it so well. And so like and there are other ways you could have done that. It describes something that like I've been trying to get at in some of these conversations, which is how can you try to push yourself to use new technologies to become a better collaborator, basically, rather than seeing it as like some amazing all-encompassing solution, right? Like, there are going to be little solutions along the way like this. And I felt extra inspired by something that we are building up towards, right? That I spent years of my life.
I know where you're going with this.
Are we going there next or no?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it. All right.
I spent years of my life in After Effects trying to understand the RGB math of blonde hair. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, of course I know what you're
right?
talking
Like,
about.
this is like not, it seems simple, like, and you talk about this in your video, that it seems like it should be the simplest thing in the world to remove a person from a green background, because it's one color and we can all tell exactly where the person is, where the water glass is, where the blonde hair is. But unfortunately, there's a lot of math between here and there that literally no one has done.
Yeah.
why is what I'm looking at interesting beyond the fact that there's a man wearing some
This is Jordan Allen being himself.
some amazing clothing choices
This is
that
what Jordan
I 100%
Allen is like every day.
endorse. Yeah.
He's always drinking 2 cups of water. He's always wearing goofy things on his head. Okay.
But can you describe why this shot looks like
Yeah,
this?
so
yeah, like
this
what
is-
is the thing?
This is intended to be the hardest shot to green screen that you could ever have to deal with. There's a couple things going on here. One, there are 2 transparent cups. By the way, one is clear glass, one is a blue glass. Okay,
Yeah.
not a clear glass, but a blue glass with a green screen behind it. So that green screen going through that is being turned blue-green.
Right. You were able to tell, right, that these are
Yeah.
the same green behind it and there's a blue.
Yeah, it's mixed
The
on that cup.
camera does not know that.
All the camera knows is that it's what it's filming, the light beams
Yeah,
that are hitting it.
yes.
It doesn't know what's foreground, it doesn't know what's background, any of that kind of stuff. The headdress that Jordan is wearing there, it's a clown skirt, I believe, actually. Not only does it contain all the colors of the rainbow, including green, it is transparent. So it's transparent in all these different colors. And then also, there's a ton of motion blur. There's motion blur all over the place, which is effectively the same as having soft gradients all over this footage. So why this is like it is because we are testing this green screen tool. I'm testing this green screen tool I've been building that we call Corridor Key. The challenge with green screens is that you go, okay, computer, take this green value and treat it as if it's transparent if it matches this green value in your picture. Computer goes, okay, I can do that. Well, I found a pixel over here. It's a little bit green, but it's a little bit something else.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? And you go, let's make that a little bit transparent. Computer goes,
Yeah.
got it, I can do that. Then computer goes, okay, well, here's your transparency. And you're like, thanks for the transparency. It looks great, but why do things still look bad? And it turns out, because when you have something like, for example, the transparent blue cup over the green screen or the transparent pink veil over the green screen, the color that the camera is seeing there is the color of that green screen mixed with the color of that thing that's in the foreground. Now you have to subtract that green. How do you do that? Well, you just have to predict the exact pixel perfect green value of what was behind that spot. Turns out, you can't. If you have a perfect green screen, you can.
Yes.
If you do it hand
But
by
that's
hand,
not-
little by little, you can.
That's not the world, and that's not the point of this anyways, right?
Right.
It could be a pink screen now.
Well, so the reality is pulling a green screen is a lot of tedious work. It was supposed to be easy. That was what we were promised, right? It's green. You eyedropper it, and it goes away. Done. I had an idea for a long time.
Yeah.
I was like, well, why not? Like, I can do 3D animation. I know, like, doesn't machine learning work where you give a neural network an input and it predicts an output and you train it on pictures or something to do it? Isn't there a way to do that? Like, I vaguely know that that's how it works. I've watched enough, I don't know, Veritasium videos to get it figured out.
Nice. Don't I know this now? Come on, Derek.
But I had the theory, right?
Yes.
So like, okay, theoretically, I could render out 10,000 clips from a 3D program of an object on a green screen background, plus the object not on the green screen background, it's on a black background, plus an alpha channel.
Yes.
And theoretically, based on every YouTube video I see, I should be able to throw it at a neural network, and eventually the neural network would get smart enough to spit out the answers. I should be able to give it a green screen image, and after it's practiced enough on these ground truths that I've given it, it should be able to just predict what the foreground element should look like without the green screen there, without those colors bleeding into the transparent areas, with the correct, unmixed, real values. That was the theory. So I sat down and I took a shot at it, right? I had nothing to lose. A man with no regrets, jumping into this. And this time I was working with Google Gemini and Anti-Gravity, which is like a smart coding system.
Yeah.
And I spec'd it out. I asked it for advice. I helped it build it with me. It held my hand. And I got to something that kind of worked. But it didn't work all the way. So that's where it's like, okay, now I need to actually learn about what I'm doing. And then just take the time, step by step, do the research, ask Gemini about like what every step it's doing. Eventually, I managed to build my own program for training a neural network.
Yes.
I managed to build all the different tests and comparisons, the losses that you need to come up with to understand how to push it to learn which direction it should go to, what number it's trying to minimize. And I ended up with something that gave me a result. So I gathered everybody in the little alcove upstairs of the TV. I got some footage of the hardest to key footage, and I stress test this tool. And this is what I had. So here's the results that we got. Hardest shot to ever key in my career.
There's no way I'm gonna regret this. I'm gonna say there's literally no way.
I appreciate Jordan for putting himself out there for
It's
these
really,
tests.
really sweet.
Dude, give me a week And I
But
will
honestly, I'm
maybe
really
do
just
one
like-
of those shots. You're lying. No way.
It is like,
Can it do the
it
double?
hits so good though.
Look at that cup.
Yeah.
It's a blue cup. It's a blue cup. It's not green.
It's so good.
I'm so proud of that.
I can't even conceive of that. I'm still stuck on the first thing, which is the edges.
Yes, but the edges in the blue cup are the same problem. Those little semi-transparent pixels on the edge of your face or your beard
the
or your
same
hair. It's the exact same problem that's being solved in that blue cup. And when the green is subtracted from that cup and it stays blue, that means that everything else is working. That means you can do hair. It means you can do motion blur. It means you can do literally anything.
This is a basic tool for people that you would have thought existed a long time ago.
I would have thought somebody else would have done what I had done because I don't want to discredit myself too much. But I feel like what I did wasn't that hard. But that really downplays what I did, so I don't want to discredit myself too much.
I don't think it downplays it at all. It makes me very, very optimistic because to me, what makes for really, really great, amazing videos, films, TV, whatever, is something that's genuinely unique. And in order to make unique things, like first, you have to be willing to run into the brick wall and surmount it.
Yeah.
But even in this case, even if the brick wall actually was this thing that should have been solved 20 years ago, getting over it helps you get to a new, different place than you would have gone, right? If you spent the entire time, like so many people do, working on the green screen, you're not working on the story as much.
Yeah.
And like, now you can work on the story a little more.
I mean,
that seems good.
This whole thing was built for our Dungeons and Dragons show, which requires us to be on the green screen reenacting the scenes we filmed at the table. Because the table that we have for our Dungeons and Dragons game is duplicated in 3D. So we can play the tabletop game and then go and film a scene as the characters inserted into the actual environment that we played on at the table.
Yes.
So it's this crazy connection of like cinema to Dungeons and Dragons. But to do that, we had to film ourselves on a green screen, obviously. And we didn't want to have to sit there and like hand key and roto every shot. You know, you get a 5-second long shot, takes you an hour to set up, you're done. But you got 300 more of those. Like, we wanted to where you could like just film ourselves on the green screen, make it like a 2-minute long shot, send it through a tool, and it's keyed. And that's all we wanted. Like, because then we can focus on like composing the shot and building the effects as opposed to just sitting there trying to cut somebody out. So that was the motivation to build this, just like the motivation to build the muzzle flash light, just like the motivation to build the endless hallway Gaussian splat, just like the motivation to build a first-person flying point of view drone. It was this idea of like, we're trying to make a piece of media, a piece of art, a piece of filmmaking, and we want to do something new or unlock ourselves to do something new. And we have an idea of how we could do it, and no one else has done the same thing yet. So let's put in the extra effort, not just to make the story and make the project, but also to do that little bit of engineering or inventing and innovating to unlock us to do something new that no one else has done at the same time.
It's inspiring, and we've seen some of these other like similar examples while I've been doing these interviews. We talked to Paul Trillo from Asteria. Do you know him?
Yeah, I know Paul. Yeah.
I just was so inspired by like what he did with all of the drawings from Paul Flores, right? He collaborated with an artist. The artist was able to essentially make an infinite number of city assets so they could fly through a city that felt like his own style, right? They were using LLMs, training a kind of like, it's called LoRa, on Paul Flores' work in order to do more Paul Flores than Paul Flores could do.
The reason I use new cameras is because they let me film stuff easier.
Yes.
You know, the reason
right.
I use
yes.
new computers is because they let me edit stuff easier. Like, it was weird. When I was going to school, there would be people who'd be going to the school to learn a program. Like, I'm going to learn Final Cut. I'm going to learn whatever. But it's not Final Cut that you need to learn. It's how to be a filmmaker and how to edit that you need to learn. Yeah, you need to learn the tool, of course, like... But that Final Cut's like a 2 to 3 week thing. And then all the rest of that should be like, how do you edit a scene to have emotional impact? By the time I was going to college, I had already gone through like 4 different editing programs.
Right.
And having to learn. I started on Media 100. I don't know if you know that one.
Oh my God. No.
And then it was iMovie.
iMovie was...
And then it was Final Cut.
Right.
And actually, I dabbled briefly in Premiere Pro. I'm talking like 2000 Premiere Pro. I very quickly lost the assumption that you learn a program and much more gained the assumption that you need to be ready to learn a new program at the drop of a hat if it lets you do what you're trying to do more efficiently and better. You know, so if I'm trying to make a video, a movie, a short film, whatever, and another program comes out that has a new way of organizing footage or identifying your clips or filtering the audio or whatever it is, and it shaves off hours of work, it's like, don't worry about your program. Get rid of the program. Move to the new tool. Like, be ready to move to the new tool because the tools are just tools. They're there to like serve your end point of view, and you have to be plastic with your thinking. You have to be ready to learn new things. You have to be good at learning.
I mean, it's a genuine life skill that is not just specific to making cool stuff, right? Like that skill will pay off in every.
Well, it's
part
easy
of
to
your
get
life.
comfortable and be like, I'm just really good at Pro Tools or whatever. Which there's an industry for it, but like you gotta be ready. You gotta be ready to like put your art form out there and find other ways to do it.
I also feel like you were asking like, what's your thesis with this thing? And like, I do have a little bit of a thesis in this series. I'm trying to discover how creators are navigating a moment because there's this massive fraught conversation with a disappointing familiarity of like just people yelling at each other over and over again and not actually talking. And what inspires me about the examples of how you use technology and how you are navigating AI is that you're finding ways to just push yourself to be more unique and more yourself. And I feel like that's true about, like, I talked to Thomas Percy Kim, who's known as the Vandalist, and Paul Trillo and you, and like everyone is on that same page. But for real, like, I don't think anybody is trying to like be like, I just want to be high quantity. Like, I'm all about high quantity. Like, no one is like writing home to their mom about doing that, right? Like, you're doing things that are
Mom,
genuinely
I posted 10,000 Slop videos today.
Yeah, exactly.
Aren't you proud of me?
Aren't you proud? Like, I'm now a podcast host of 50,000 podcasts. What do you think, guys? I don't want to send that up too much because I could imagine a world in which that's actually like a genuinely helpful thing to like a very specific group of 50,000 people where they need a personalized thing. Like, I was mentioning I'm married to an educator, right? There are like really interesting use cases for LLM technology that are very similar to your use case for LLM technology, which is help me learn at my pace as opposed to at your pace.
That's how I've been using it. It's a research tool and it's a reasoning machine, and you very quickly learn where the limits are, and you learn where the limits aren't, and it's just like everything else. It's one part of the machine.
Not everybody will agree, but like I think most people can agree that like some uses of these technologies are bad. And that's not that helpful. What I want to know is like, have you created any sort of rubric for yourself? Any sort of bar for yourself that you're saying like, well, it feels super simple in this machine learning one where you're able to say like, well, I own 100% of the data that I'm doing math to. So like, where's the problem? But like any sort of bar like that you've been imposing on yourself that you feel like might be helpful to other creators, because obviously everyone's going to set the bar differently. Like, it's very difficult right now, especially.
Yeah. I mean, the bar is to live by your morals, be open about what you're doing. It's the internet. There's going to be a section of people that are angry about everything.
Of course.
That's just how it's going to be. But listen to people. And at the end of the day, just do your thing. Like, make your art. Art is going to piss people off. That's the thing. Like,
certainly,
have some balls and make it. I don't know. You can't judge your stuff to a certain extent. You have to be who you are. You have to be honest with yourself, and then you just got to make it. And so much of life and making things is going to be people telling you that you can't or that you shouldn't. We did a YouTube Red series called Lifeline. This is like a full budget union shoot. It was an amazing experience. I learned so much from doing Lifeline. And I'm really proud of what we made. I think the episodes are really good. But it was an experience of working with like traditional union sets and union crews and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of positives, but there's also some things that are dinosaurs in that process.
Yeah.
And for example, one of the things you can't do is touch the camera. Now, I am a YouTuber. I use the camera all the time. I direct and think through the camera. That's how I've shot all my movies.
That's amazing.
But I can't touch the camera.
So they told you to not touch the camera.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
How did it go?
I didn't touch the camera.
But I mean, did you do it again?
I have not since done another production where I can't touch the camera, no. You have a group saying, you can't do this.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? I touch the camera, so I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah.
It means I will have to unfortunately give up many things to do that, but if I do it my way, I can now touch the camera and use the camera. And so as an artist, especially if you are trying to do new things and you're doing experimental things, there are going to be things that either people directly say you can't do or society leans on you and says you shouldn't do. And you should understand why, and you should know what you're doing. And don't set out just to offend people or anything like that. But just understand that pressure is always going to be there. And it's easy just to be like, well, okay, then I won't take a risk. I won't explore that. But that's that's where new things lie. And
Yeah.
once again, it's important to be novel. It's important to be unique. And if you got to find somewhere to be novel or unique, or no one's going to give a shit.
People might try to tell you no, but you can't, like, and I just like love that like that's the spirit that, like, honestly, like, it is why I do what I do too, right? There were definitely people that told me no, and then you just do it a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to just figure it out. You know, everybody has their own path, and like,
Yeah.
very fortunate and privileged to work with like a huge team of people again. Like, it's
Yeah.
always a privilege to have somebody put millions of dollars behind
It's
you. Like,
amazing.
You know, it's worth it. You know,
I love working with a big team. That's not the point.
but
yeah.
100% comes with challenges.
Yeah.
And then if you want to do things your way, you're not going to get somebody else's money to do it. You know, that's a real truth.
You make a dope
Sorry.
proof of concept.
Unless an audience has your back. 100%.
Oh, sorry. Right.
Unless an audience has your back.
Sorry.
Which is how we've fallen into it, right? It's like everything we make is because of our supporters and subscribers.
Yeah.
And like the people that support what we do are patrons, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing to have this direct relationship with your audience, with the people that support your art, like, and not have a middleman or
Yeah, man.
whatever that you have to go through for permission or
this is
funding. Yeah, it's
This
crazy.
is the future, and we're living in it.
But that takes us, I think, back to our,
Yeah.
real thesis here. So we're in a world where, we can have audiences now, and they don't have to be huge audiences, and usually they aren't. There's a lot of people with audiences of 10,000, 20,000. We're very fortunate that we have a big audience, but even then it's taken us, 15 years to get there, right? An audience directly supporting you doesn't give you $200 million to go make your next film, but it does give you some revenue. But so you have this one side where it's becoming easier and easier to be funded as a creator from your audience and to have that connection, to eliminate the need of distributors and middlemen and all these studios, all these things that get in the way of just making your stuff and people that want to see your stuff. And on the other hand, you have technology, and you have things becoming easier and easier to make. So now, maybe your movie would have cost $200 million 50 years ago, and then it's going to cost $50 million 20 years ago, and it's going to cost $10 million 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then last year to do that movie may have cost you $3 million, and you're not quite there. You're not getting $3 million from your patrons yet, but maybe you're making 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, something in there. And at a certain point, these lines are going to meet.
Yeah.
And they're already meeting for a lot of creators, and it's really
Yes.
cool to see it happen.
It is.
And that's the journey I've been on with everything that we're doing at Corridors. I'm trying to bring the cost, I guess, the challenge, the resource need of making what I want to make. I'm trying to bring that down and make that match what our audience is willing to support us at and what they can support us at. And when those two things meet, we can do some really cool things.
Yeah.
And, in the past, those things have met at the level of, say, doing a 10-minute short film or exploring this concept or doing something like this D&D show. But little by little, as technology changes, and it's up to us as the creators to learn the new technology and to use it in a smart way and figure it out and make something still meaningful that impacts and makes the audience feel something and makes them happy and all that kind of stuff. But little by little, if we can do that evolution and we can keep that audience and build that audience, it just enables us when those points meet to do crazier and crazier and better and greater things.
I can't wait to see them. I know
Me
you're going to
too.
do it. I know you're going to do it.
By the way, everybody, this green screen thing is free.
Oh,
It's
yes,
open
you
source.
didn't see that.
You can download it.
You were talking about the open source community, and it was like,
Yes,
no, like,
we barely got to touch
FYI,
upon that.
free.
I would recommend, if you want to try it out, somebody made a graphic interface that installs on everything. There's just an install file you can double click on inside the folder once you download it. Google Easy Corridor Key.
Yes. Oh my God.
That's the one I'd recommend you start with if you're fresh and you've never really messed with this before.
Yes.
It only exists like this because of the awesome work that the open source community did once I released it. I released this thing meant to run on a huge workstation. I was like, good luck, everybody else. But hey, at least
they
it's
just,
out there.
figured it out?
And then within days, you're like, no, it's fine. It works. It runs on everything.
Whoa.
There's plugins that are in progress right now for After Effects and Premiere and Resolve. And a lot of this is happening because people can vibe code it now. Because everybody's firing up Claude code and things like that. And they're actually, if they're passionate and they have some time and some know-how, these LLMs are unlocking them to do a lot of work. And I am so fascinated to see what happens in the space of software and the software tools for art, because now we're reaching a point where artists can make their tools. And not to say that artists weren't making the tools in the past, but like you're reliant on a big company with a team that costs a lot of money to make these tools. But now if you're like, oh, but I have this one really unique thing that I want to do, and I got my unique audience that wants to see it, and yeah, that's not as big as Adobe's entire subscriber base, but now with these new tools, maybe I can bring that thing to life.
Yep.
And like every time there's one of those opportunities, there's an opportunity to break out, to show people something new, to be a fresh taste of something out there, fresh breath of air. And to an artist, that's everything.
That's true story-wise, and it's true as you said this, right? You're building with your community. And so it's not even just, it's something unique in a story. It's something unique for the community. Like, they can use it. I'm going to use it. Do you have 1 minute to see the terrible
I have a
key?
minute.
I can't tell you how embarrassed I am to do this with you. Are you ready?
Yeah, hit me. I got the Gregory Bros.
My AI is going to be pretty radical.
Yeah, you can, quarter key's got your back right there. That's not a problem anymore.
Hey everyone, next we have our final episode of the miniseries. You're not going to want to miss it. Please hit subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like this miniseries, you want more discussions like it, come join our free Patreon. We'll break more of this down in a live stream we're having next Monday, April 6th on the Digital Spaghetti Patreon. I'll dig into the data we gathered from over 300 of you who filled out our giftorcurse.ai interactive. So far, the data shows that the majority of you are opportunists when it comes to AI. That's our sort of digital laundry folding zone. You're not sold on this being an art form, really. You're not opposed to saving time with it either. All right, see you next time. Come back next week, right? Right, guys?